Okay, welcome to Swell Academy. Today we're going to be talking about distance at midpoints. First, we're going to discuss a little bit about distance along a number line. Just give you a couple simple points and coordinates here. Remember, a point is a location, right? It could be a location in space, could be a location on a line. And what we're basically doing is finding the space or distance in between those points. We're finding the space in between. Now keep in mind, with distance, a focus you want to have is that it is always going to be a positive measurement. Very tough to run negative 3 miles, right? And basically what's happening when you're finding distance, you're finding the difference in the location of the points. Now, if you think about something that always needs to be positive, and you're finding the difference of the 2 points, -3 and 5, well, let's come up with a formula for that and basically say, okay, if I'm trying to find the positive difference or the absolute difference between 2 points, why don't I find the difference of the 2 points and make it an absolute value? Now, if we're looking at this from here to here, or from -3 to 0, we say it's about 3 units, and from here to here it's 5, so that gives us a total of 8. Let's see if by using this formula, a minus b, -3 minus 5, or you could do 5 minus a -3. Let's see if we come up with that same distance of 8. And in fact, you do. The absolute value of -8 being 8, and the absolute value of this is, I did not add, so I added. Absolute value of +8 is also 8. So my distance here of these 2 points of -3 and 5 are going to give me a value of 8. They're giving me a positive measure of 8. So this is a very, very important distance formula which you could use, because you may not always be able to use a number line and identify the 8 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that are between the 2 points we're working with. Now going forward, we want to kind of start talking about midpoint as well. And if you're looking at midpoint, one good geometry word to look at is the word equidistant. And basically this is saying it's 2 things that have equal distance, right? It's a way to say equal distance in the same word. And we want to find a point that is exactly in between -3 and 5. Now, if we know that this is 8, we probably know we're going to want to go a distance of 4 here, right? So let's just make an estimation. Okay, both are going to be 4, so we know probably our midpoint is going to be somewhere around 1. But again, we don't always have a number line, and maybe not so much easy numbers to work with. So how can we find a midpoint with a formula? Well, our distance was 8, and notice we traveled both equidistance of 4. How do we get that number 4? Well, basically we divided 8 divided by 2. And if I want to come up with a number here, you know, I could find the distance divided by 2, or I could find an average of those 2 points. How do I find an average? Well, an average is the sum of 2 points, 2 or more points, divided by that amount of points. So if I have 2 points, A and B, I want to add them together and divide by 2. Let's look at that. -3 plus 5 over 2. -3 plus 5 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. And that's the answer, and that will be the location of our midpoint. And you know, you're again looking at it 2 different ways. One, taking the distance and going halfway, or kind of finding an average of those 2 points. Now, I like this to kind of lead into maybe the location of midpoint on a coordinate graph. So let's look at that. Now, what do I mean by that? So we looked at a midpoint of 2 points on a number line, right? Just basically one axis. What happens when now we have 2 axes we're working with, or 2 points we're finding the average of? In this case, the formula is the same, but basically needs to happen twice. So let's look at one set of coordinates, -2 and 3, and 4 and -3. Now, when I like to plot, I just like to use the dashes that I need. So I need -2 on the x and 3 on the y, and plot my point. And I need a 4 and a -3. 1, 2, 3, 4, and a -3. Now, I think one excellent tool in math is an estimation tool. So basically, if I were to look at this midpoint, it's somewhere around here, all right? If I'm just gonna estimate. So maybe my estimate would be, let me get a darker color here. Maybe my estimate would be something like 1 for x and maybe -0.5 for my y. That's some sort of estimate. So when I do use my formula, which is adding my x's and divided by 2, or adding my x coordinates and then adding my y's and dividing by 2, I want to make sure that I'm getting something relatively close to what this is. So let's do that. Let's add our x's, -2 plus 4, divide that over 2. So basically, you're finding your midpoint of your x's and you're finding your midpoint of your y's. And let's look at, and I'm going to try to demonstrate that in a second. 3 plus a -3 over 2, and I would have ended up with 2 over 2 and 0 over 2, which would have given me a midpoint of 1 and 0. And I was close there. I was close. It was 1 and 0. I said 1 and -0.5. So this was our answer here. Now, understand that the distance between our x's is about 6. So we went 1, 2, 3 units to find our midpoint, which is what we did on the previous page. Remember, we found the midpoint of -2 and 4. That's where that was. And then the distance between our y's is also 6. And if I were to say, okay, distance of 3, same thing here. If you see, that's where kind of our midpoint is created here. I like to just draw another kind of example to your attention. Just the idea of, if you do simulate your formula, your midpoint of coordinates formula, and you're trying to solve for it, and you run into a problem like this, where, again, you're adding your x's, then you're adding your y's, plus 4, divided by 2. And again, you see here, you get that 0 over 2, so that ends up being a 0. But here you get a -2 plus 1, which is a -1 over 2. I just want to draw to your attention that it is okay, and you will have some coordinates, both on a number line and on a coordinate axis, that may be a decimal or a fraction. That's okay. That'll definitely happen too when you guys have, you students have odd numbers. You may see that decimals or fractions there. So it's okay to see that. I just wanted to draw that to your attention there. And if you wanted to see that here, that would kind of look 1 and 4. This would be this coordinate here, and then the -2 and 4, which would be somewhere down here. And it does make sense that our midpoint is somewhere at -0.5. It should be actually -0.5 and 0 there. I hope this helps. Remember, keep working hard, practice this. Estimating is a good way to help you make sure that when you do get an answer, it's somewhere where you want it to be. Here's a very important formula for your coordinate midpoint. Don't forget your distance formula, and don't forget your just regular formula of a number line. Thanks for stopping by.